So hi everyone, good day. So for today's video, we're going to tackle about the evolutions of Philippine Constitution. So a lot of you guys know what is Philippine Constitution about. So ano ito karon na ata karon free ta, we are free to speak up, to voice out, we have individual rights and we have different kind of rights. It's because of Philippine institution. So today we're going to tackle about the first constitution. Okay, so first constitution is the Biak na Bato. So Biak na Bato, it is drafted during the Philippine Revolution against Spain. So the constitution of Biak na Bato was composed in late 1897 while revolutionary forces led by Emilio Aguinaldo had withdrawn to a mountain stronghold in Bulacan to regroup after hard fighting on other provinces. So katunan ni siya nga kanang silang Emilio Aguinaldo is ni ato sa mountains. It's because kapilihon na sila sa Spain. So mo din siya ang nag-spark na mag-create sila og constitution biyak na bato. In the precarious environment of a Republican insurgency, political leaders sought a compact statement of principle and government that would give shape and legitimacy to their cause. So, according to the standard historical accounts, so Artacho and Felix Pirer, often anglicized as Felix Pirer, prepared a constitution at Biak na Bato as part of revolutionaries attempt. So, ang Biak na Bato guys is lugar na siya sa Bulacan pod. So, mura gi-title nila ang ilahang gihimo nga constitution dito nga lugar. So, the document's promulgation in November 1897 was thus both a practical and a symbolic act. So, kani siya is very practical at the same time symbolic kay diri nag-start or nag-spark bitaw ang pag-create of revolution constitution. So, it bound local commanders to a single political project and announced to Spaniards and neutrals alike that Filipino leaders were thinking about governance, not merely guerrilla tactics. So it is according to Zaide in 1999. So kani siya is murag gipahiwati din sa mga Pinoy nga it is not merely a guerrillas but a governance and kanang government bitaw siya gid na centered mong ilan ning gibuhat. So Biak na Bato was modeled after the Cuban Constitution in 1895. So, modeled after the Cuban Constitution in 1895, the framers drew inspiration from other anti-colonial and republican examples. So, kani ang Biak na Bato, gihimo siya and murag gi-adapt from the Cuban Constitution. So that influence is visible, the emphasis on provisional Republican Council, the articulation of popular sovereignty, and the intent to separate church and state features the Filipino drafters adapted to local conditions. Muna siya kanang muna siya ang kato siya ang mga why is it kanang murag muna siya ang ihabitang kanang characteristics nga ilang gi-adapt from Cuban Constitution. So next is it is muna din siya na established na din ang Republic of Biak na Bato. So when promulgated, it is commonly said that it is promulgated November 1, 1897. So the Constitution served to establish the Republic of Biak na Bato and to organize a Supreme Council with Aguinaldo at its head. And functionally, the Republic was a wartime provisional government rather than a fully functioning state. So muna siya ang iyang murag downside. So it lacked the time and secure territory needed to build the administrative apparatus of a stable regime. Still, its creation mattered politically. So bisan pag ingana siya murag kanang nag-lack siya o kanabitong murag kanang function pero kana siya is na Tsada siya nga pagka-exist kay diha nagsugod jud tanan as what I have said. So, next is but the biyak na bato ang wala gid siya naglast long. So mo nang wala pud kay siya giingon nga kanang fully ano bitaw gid siya nga constitution. It is because na-end siya ended with the pack of biyak na bato and Aguinaldo's exile. So akong basahon, so the republic's life was cut short. So sama sa giingon ang biyak na bato is na-cut short lang gid siya kay it is short by the negotiated truce between the revolutionaries and the Spanish colonial government, mediated by Pedro Paterno. So the Pact of Biak na Bato, signed December 14 to 15 in 1897, arranged for the voluntary exile of Aguinaldo and several leaders to Hong Kong in exchange for amnesty and an indemnity commonly records as $800 and the promise of reforms, many of which were never fully implemented, and Aguinaldo's departure and the partial temporary nature of payments meant the Republic project in Biak na Bato could not be realized at home. Instead, the exile produced the Hong Kong junta, which used the indemnity and the safety of exile to plan the next phase of resistance. In short, the pact ended the Biak na Bato experiment as an on-the-ground government, even as it kept leaders and political purpose alive abroad. So, mula siya ang hinungdan nga nung na-end ang Biak na Bato. Thank you. Next.
The Malolos Constitution. So, quick trivia, did you know that the Philippines was a home for the very first constitution in the first Republic Constitution, which is the Malolos Constitution. So, Malolos Constitution on January 23, 1899, Filipino leaders gathered in Malolos, Bulacan to inaugurate the Malolos Republic. So, this bold and historic move came after the centuries of Spanish colonial rule, marking a new chapter of nation quest for freedom. So it was led by President Emilio Aguinaldo, and it was democratic republican constitution that separated the church and the states and created a government with three branches, which is the executive, legislative, and judiciary. It was written by the Felipe Calderon y Roca and Felipe Buencamino as an alternative to a pair of proposals to Malolos Congress by Apolinario Mabini and the Pedro Paterno. So, the Malolos Constitution Republic, or the Malolos Republic, established a groundbreaking constitution, one that guaranteed, as I've said earlier, civil liberties, separations of powers, and a representative to the government. So, the Malolos Congress, composed of elective delegates from across the islands, crafted these laws and policies aimed at building a fair and just Filipino nation. So, the Republic Constitution was remarkably progressive for its five including provision, which is the universals, the education, the freedom of the press, and religious tolerance. Although the Malolos Constitution is short-term due to the pre-American War, the Malolos Republic remains a powerful symbol of Filipino courage, determination, and vision to continue to fight for the freedom.
So, good evening everyone. I am Jenny Torrecarion and my topic is all about the U.S. colonial period 1902 to 1935. So, the U.S. colonial period marked the time when the Philippines was under the control and supervision of the United States. After the fall of the First Philippine Republic, this period was significant because it introduced the Filipinos to democratic institution and the gradual political participation that led toward independence. So in 1902, the Philippine Organic Act was passed. This law established a civil government in the Philippines and created the Philippine Assembly, giving Filipino a chance to elect the representative. It was the first step in allowing Filipinos to take part in the administration of their own country under American rule. Later, in 1916, the Jones Law, also known as the Philippine Autonomy Act, was enacted. This law created a fully elected bicameral legislature, meaning both houses of the legislature were composed Filipino representative. It also contained a promise of a future independence once Filipino proved capable of self-government. This act became an important milestone in the country's political development. Finally, in 1934, the Tidings-McDuffie Act was passed by the U.S. Congress. This law set a definite timetable for Philippines independence and established the Commonwealth. And end of the Philippines, which would serve as a transition government before full independence. Overall, the U.S. colonial period helped shape the Philippines' political system. It introduced democratic ideals, elections, self-governance, which prepared the country for its future as an independent nation. So, that's all in my topic. Thank you.
The Constitution of the Philippine Commonwealth. The Constitution, whether written or unwritten, is recognized as the law of the land as it serves as the basis for the legitimacy of any governmental acts necessary for its existence. It is a codified law that determines the powers and duties of a government, and it embodies certain rights for the people. Right after the signing of the Treaty of Paris in Washington, D.C. in 1898 that ceded in the Philippines to the U.S., paying the amount of $20 million to Spain in the process, and the eruption of Filipino-American War in 1899. Our country was placed under a military government until 1901 with the passing of the Sponsor Amendment, putting an end to military rule in the Philippines and replacing it with a civil government with William H. Taft as the first civil governor. The ratification of the Philippine Bill of 1902, which called the creation of a lower legislative branch composed of elected Filipino legislatures, and the Jones Law in August 1916 gave the Filipinos the opportunity to govern themselves better. The first Philippine Assembly, which convened on October 16, 1907, was composed of educated Filipinos from illustrious clients such as Sergio Osmeña and Manuel L. Quezon, who revived the issue of immediate independence for the Filipinos, and this was expressed by sending political missions to the U.S. Congress. Controversy divided the Philippine legislature with a debate on the acceptance or rejection of the Hair Hose Cutting Bill brought home by Osmeña Rojas' mission from the U.S. Congress in 1931, which provided for a 10-year transition period before the granting of Philippine independence. The passage of the Independence Bill resulted in the splitting of the Democrat Party and Nacionalista Party into two factions, the pros and the antis. Majority in the legislature led by Quezon and Recto rejected the said bill, thereby composing the antis, while the pros became the minority under Osmeña, Rojas, and others. On October 17, 1933, Quezon and others triumphed in this battle as the Philippine legislature rejected the bill. Quezon eventually brought in from the United States the Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as the Public Law 73-127, authored by Senator Millard Tidings and Representative John McDuffie, a slightly amended version of the Hair Hose Cutting Bill signed by President Franklin Roosevelt on March 24, 1934. The bill set by July 4 after the 10th year of the Commonwealth as date of the Philippine independence. This was accepted by the Philippine legislature on May 1, 1934. The Organization of Constitutional Convention that would draw up the fundamental law of the land based on the American Model Fund of the salient provisions of the Tidings-McDuffie Act. Delegates to the convention were subsequently elected in 1934. In the first meeting held on July 30, at the session of the House of Representatives, Claro M. Recto was unanimously elected as its president. Salient features of the 1935 Constitution include the following: a bicameral legislature composed of a Senate and the House of Representatives. The President is to be elected to a 4-year term together with a Vice President, without re-election. Rights of suffrage by male citizens of the Philippines who are 21 years old or over and are able to read and write. Extension of the right of suffrage to women within 2 years after the adoption of the Constitution. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Convention on February 8, 1935 and ratified by President Roosevelt in Washington, D.C. on March 25, 1935. Elections were held in September 1935. Manuel A. Quezon was elected as the President of the Commonwealth. The 1935 Constitution provided the legal basis of the Commonwealth government, which was considered a transition government before the granting of the Philippine independence with American-inspired constitution. The Philippine government would eventually pattern its government system after American government. It has been said that the 1935 Constitution was the best written Philippine charter ever. That's all for my part.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we will be discussing the 1943 Constitution. Now, the 1943 Constitution was the constitution of the Japanese-sponsored Second Republic of the Philippines. It was recognized as a legitimate and binding only in Japanese-controlled areas of the Philippines, but was ignored by the United States government and the Philippine Commonwealth government in exile. Now, in June 1943, the Preparatory Commission for Philippine Independence, or the PCPI, which was composed of 20 delegates at the time, was created to draft a new constitution by the Kalibapi, or the Kapisanan sa Paglilingkod ng Bagong Pilipinas, the only political organization allowed at that time. The Japanese monitored the drafting of the constitution and instructed the members of PCPI, led by Jose Pilar, who was an ally of the Japanese at that time because of his criticisms towards the United States government during their time in the Philippines, that the Constitution should conform with the principles of the Japanese-led Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Now, in September 1943, the draft Constitution was unanimously approved by all members of the PCPI and was submitted for ratification in a popular convention of the Kalibapi in Manila. In September 4, 1943, the Japanese-sponsored 1943 Constitution was signed and ratified in a General Assembly, and 2 days later by 117 members of the Kapisanan sa Paglilingkod sa Bagong Pilipinas. Hence, the Second Republic, which lasted from 1943 to 1945, was formally proclaimed, with Jose Pilar appointed as president and inaugurated into office in October 14, 1943.
Hello everyone. The 1986 Freedom Constitution, also known as a Proclamation Number 3, came after the EDSA People Power Revolution that ended the rule of Ferdinand Marcos. Marcos was removed from office. Corazon Aquino became a new president of the Philippines and started move to create a new constitution, or what we call democratic constitution for the country. First, the 1973 constitution used under Marcos was removed. This happened after years of dictatorship and abuse of power, especially after the assassination of Senator Benigno Aquino Jr., who was the husband of Corazon Aquino. His death many Filipino was anger and became the one main reason many many Filipino people was joined in IDSA People Power Revolution. When the revolution succeed, Marcos and his family fled the Philippines, and President Aquino introduced the provisional constitution in 1986 to guide the country towards the democracy. The provisional constitution was called the Freedom Constitution. It was a big role during the transition period from dictatorship to democracy. It brought back civil liberties such as freedom press and freedom speech. It also gave legal power to the new government of President Aquino, allowing her appoint members of Constitution Commission to write a new permanent constitution. It made sure that the government continued to run smoothly while waiting from the new character to be completed. Finally, a group of 48 people was chosen to draft the new constitution. This member came from different background and worked to create what we now know as the 87 Constitution. However, the commission was not perfect. Some criticized it for not being deserved enough. Only 6 of the member were women, which was the 12.6% of total group still there. Work led to the creation of the commission. That restored democracy and strengthened the right of every Filipino. In summary, the 1986 Freedom Constitution served as a bridge from dictatorship to democracy. It restored the right of the Filipino people, give the government a legal foundation, and open the path for the 1987 Constitution that we will still follow today.
The Philippine Constitution changes over time mirror the country's fight for independence and its right to govern itself, which have been, however, affected by the interventions of foreign powers. During the Spanish rule 1565 to 1898, the Filipinos did not have their own government but were under the control of Spain's centralized system. Nevertheless, the Malolos Constitution na 1899 was the first Filipino-led government. Next is under American colonization, 1898 to 1946. The democratic principles were implanted through the Jones Law, 1916, and the Tidings-McDuffie Act, 1934, which were steps toward the giving of independence to the Philippines. Next is the Japanese occupation, 1942 to 1945, led to the establishment of a puppet government under the 1943 Constitution, which had no real power. After independence, in the 1946, the Philippines set up the 1947 Constitution, and then later version which continued to perfect the democratic system while still dealing with the influence of the U.S. Overall, the country's constitutional journey is a testament to the people's unyielding quest for sovereignty and national identity.